A winter blackout never arrives with drama. It begins with silence. One moment, your home is ordinary, predictable, warmed by machines you barely think about. The next, the world slips into stillness. No hum of appliances, no glow from the thermostat. Only the sound of wind pressing against the walls, testing every weakness in the structure. At first, you take it lightly. You gather a few candles, you sit with your family in the dim, amber glow, and tell yourselves this won't last long. But the temperature tells a different story. The house exhales its stored heat hour by hour. 60 degrees becomes 55. 55 becomes 45. The comfort you once assumed was permanent begins to crumble. Instinct drives you to the familiar solution. You reach for blankets, piles of them. Quilts, comforters, wool throws, layer after layer until you vanish beneath them, hoping weight will equal warmth. But the cold still finds you. It sinks through the mattress, moves into your spine, spreads into your chest. The shiver that rises isn't just from the room, it's from within. Because in a true grid-down winter emergency, blankets don't protect you the way you think they do. And your modern home, built for convenience rather than resilience, quietly assists the cold. This isn't how people used to face winter. Our ancestors endured centuries of brutal cold, ice age nights, medieval freezes, frontier storms, without electricity, furnaces, or double-pane glass. Yet they survived because they understood the one principle we've forgotten. Heat is not given, it must be kept. Tonight on Historia Prime, we uncover that missing knowledge. We examine the physics your comfort has hidden from you, expose the myths that mislead millions every winter, and reveal the single, proven survival method, used by explorers, soldiers, and thermal engineers that outperforms blankets every time. Winter reveals the truth about comfort. It was never guaranteed. But with the right understanding, neither is defeat. Welcome to the cold. Now let's learn how to master it. Part 1. The physics of the freeze. To survive a winter blackout, we must first understand the real enemy. Cold is not a force pressing in on you. In physics, it doesn't even exist. There is only heat, your heat, and the constant struggle to keep it from escaping. Survival is simply the art of slowing that escape long enough to make it through the night. Your body, right now, is a small but determined furnace. Even at rest, it produces about 100 watts of heat, just enough to warm a tiny space, barely enough to protect a modern human in a collapsing indoor climate. And when the power dies, everything around you begins working to steal that precious energy. A warm house becomes a hungry machine. It drains your heat through 3 pathways: radiation, convection, and conduction. Most people only notice convection, the cold air brushing against their face, the drafts that sneak under doors. They push towels into the cracks, tape plastic over windows, and think they've solved the problem. They haven't, because the most relentless thief is silent, invisible, and everywhere. It is radiation. If the walls around you sit at 40 degrees Fahrenheit, they don't just feel cold. They pull warmth out of your body. Your skin emits infrared heat like a beacon, sending your life energy across the room to warm the drywall, the windows, the furniture. Even under blankets, if your face is exposed to colder surfaces, you are leaking heat. Studies show that up to 65% of heat loss can come from this radiation alone. But the most deadly mechanism, the one responsible for countless quiet tragedies in freezing homes, is conduction. Think of the shock of stepping barefoot onto tile. The tile and the rug may be the exact same temperature, yet one is agony while the other feels safe. Dense materials experience no mercy. They absorb heat from your body 25 times faster than air does. And when you lie on a mattress in a failing house, or worse, directly on the floor, you connect yourself to an infinite heat sink. You cannot warm the earth, but the earth can absolutely cool you. This is why the classic blanket strategy collapses the moment temperatures plunge. A blanket traps air above you, but it does nothing to protect you from the ocean of cold beneath you. While you fight to warm the space around your chest and shoulders, the floor is quietly draining your core through your spine, your most vulnerable highway of heat loss. So the question becomes unavoidable. How do we stop fighting the entire world and start controlling a small part of it? How do we turn a freezing modern house into a functional survival shelter? The answer starts with a simple truth. In the cold, the only way to win is to shrink your world. Part 2. The lifeboat strategy. When a submarine floods, the captain doesn't fight the whole ocean at once. He seals the bulkheads and shrinks the world down to the compartments that can still survive. In a winter blackout, you must do exactly the same. The biggest mistake people make is trying to live normally inside their entire home. A modern house, 2,000 square feet of open air, is not a shelter during a power failure. It is a cavern your tiny 100-watt body cannot possibly heat. The warmth you produce vanishes into that empty volume long before it reaches you. So your first mission is to choose one room. Ideally a south-facing room that catches sunlight. A room with minimal windows, fewer exterior walls, and good natural containment. This becomes your lifeboat, your only ecosystem that matters. You close off the rest of the house like sealing off a sinking hull. Doors stay shut. Heavy blankets hang across doorframes. If you live in an open concept layout, you improvise walls with duct tape and plastic sheets, or shower curtains, or even bed sheets. You are creating what survival engineers call a thermal envelope, a much smaller space where every watt of heat has purpose. But here is the real breakthrough, the pivot from hardship to comfort. You can shrink your world even smaller. Because the most effective survival shelter you can build inside your own home is a camping tent. Yes, right there, in the middle of your living room. A standard bedroom might hold about 1,000 cubic feet of air. A tent holds 80. When you and your family climb inside, your combined bodies generate 300 to 400 watts of heat, trapped in a tiny insulated bubble. Field tests show that a tent pitched inside a freezing house can be 15 to 20 degrees warmer inside purely from body heat. If your house is 40 degrees, cold enough that you can see your breath, your tent can rise to 60. Suddenly, the difference between a miserable, sleepless night and a manageable, restorative one becomes a simple matter of geometry. And if you don't own a tent, you build your own microclimate. A dining table becomes a frame, blankets become walls, the floor becomes the foundation of a heat-saving fortress. It looks childish, almost playful, but the physics behind it is deadly serious. You are cutting your heat loss by orders of magnitude without burning a single drop of fuel. But remember the greatest enemy we uncovered earlier: conduction. You cannot simply place your tent on the bare floor, because the floor will drain your heat faster than the air ever could. So before you build anything, you lay down insulation. Rugs, yoga mats, folded comforters, couch cushions, even cardboard flattened into layers. All of them trap tiny pockets of air which act as thermal barriers. You want at least a couple of inches of separation between your body and the floor beneath you. That small distance is the dividing line between warmth and hypothermia. Now you have your tent, you have your insulation, you have your family gathered in a small protected space that your own bodies can heat. You've created a lifeboat in the middle of the storm. But inside that lifeboat, another challenge is forming, one most people never expect. Because every human furnace produces not just heat, but moisture. Part 3. The moisture trap. There is a quiet paradox at the heart of winter survival. You fight desperately to hold on to heat, yet at the same time, you must let something else escape. Because the very act of staying alive, of breathing, of sleeping, of simply existing, creates a hidden threat inside your shelter. Every sleeping human exhales nearly a pint of water vapor overnight. In a house with heating, that moisture disappears unnoticed. But inside a sealed tent or a tightly wrapped blanket fort, that vapor has nowhere to go. It climbs the air, touches the cold fabric of the tent walls, and instantly turns into droplets of water or crystals of ice. And once moisture appears, the physics of survival turns against you. If you wake to find your sleeping bag damp, you are already losing the fight. Water conducts heat 25 times faster than air. That means wet insulation doesn't just fail, it becomes a pathway for cold to rush into your body. A down sleeping bag with moisture in its fibers loses its loft, collapses on itself, and can no longer trap warm air. What once kept you alive becomes a chilled shroud that drains you. This is why the solution feels so counterintuitive. In the coldest nights, when every instinct tells you to seal the tent tight and trap every scrap of warmth inside, you must do the opposite. You must open the vents. You must allow airflow. You must let the moisture escape before it turns your shelter into a refrigerator. A slightly cooler, drier tent is always safer than a warm, humid one that soaks your clothes and bedding. Dry air protects life, damp air destroys it, and the moisture trap doesn't threaten your shelter alone, it threatens your body. The military's cold weather doctrine summarizes the entire science of survival into 4 letters. COLD. The C stands for clean, because dirt and oils on your clothes compress the fibers and kill their insulating power. Clean layers trap air, dirty ones collapse and leak heat. The O stands for overheating, the danger that surprises almost everyone. In cold weather, sweat is the enemy. If you're working, shoveling snow, rearranging furniture, building your tent, and you feel yourself getting warm, you remove a layer immediately. The Inuit have a saying, if you sweat, you die. Because once that sweat cools, it freezes into a thin, merciless layer of ice against your skin. The L stands for layers, loose and breathable. Multiple thin layers create pockets of trapped air, nature's most effective insulator. One thick layer cannot do the same job. And finally, the D stands for dry. Dry socks, dry gloves, dry base layers. Moisture is the beginning of hypothermia. If something gets damp, remove it. Warm it near your body, not against your bare skin, but close enough to capture your excess heat. Let it dry before you sleep, because in the cold, warmth is not just about adding heat. It is about preventing the slow, invisible attack of moisture before it steals the night from you. And now that your shelter is dry and your layers are working for you, there's one more system you must activate, the internal engine that keeps your core alive long after the lights go out. Part 4. Feeding the furnace. Your body may function like a 100-watt heater, but even the best heater fails without fuel. And in a winter power outage, the way you feed yourself becomes a survival system all on its own. Modern life has conditioned us to fear calories, to seek low-fat labels and light meals. But when the temperature falls and the grid collapses, that logic reverses. In the cold, calories are not the enemy. They are heat. Digestion itself produces warmth, a phenomenon known as the thermic effect of food. Yet different foods behave like different fuels. If you reach for a candy bar, you'll feel a brief, bright burst of energy, the same way a handful of dry leaves might flare when tossed onto a dying fire. But that flare burns out almost instantly, leaving you colder than before. The crash is real, and in survival conditions, it is dangerous. What you need are logs, slow, dense, enduring sources of heat. You need fat. Fat and protein require effort for your body to break down. That effort is internal work, and work produces thermal energy. This is why Arctic explorers didn't live off vegetables or bread. They relied on pemmican, a concentrated mix of dried meat and rendered fat, designed to burn slow and steady inside the body like a well-built fire. During a blackout, your modern equivalent is surprisingly simple. Peanut butter, cheese, nuts, jerky, foods rich in stable calories. A single spoonful of peanut butter before you crawl into your tent fortress is like adding a solid log to the fire. It keeps your metabolism quietly burning through the long hours of the night. But there is another layer to this story, one written into your biology long before central heating existed. Hidden beneath your skin is a forgotten survival tool called brown fat, or brown adipose tissue. While ordinary white fat stores energy, brown fat does the opposite. It burns energy to make heat. Its cells are loaded with mitochondria, tiny engines built not to store, but to ignite. Babies depend on brown fat because they cannot shiver. Adults still carry remnants of it, mostly around the neck, spine, and upper torso. And here is the remarkable part. You can train your body to build more of it. Studies show that regular, safe exposure to cool temperatures activates brown fat and increases its presence. It is the body's evolutionary answer to winter. Non-shivering thermogenesis, heat created without movement, a survival program from our ancestors. So if you live in a cold climate, those brisk morning walks, those brief moments of tolerating the chill before grabbing a coat, they are not just discomfort, they are conditioning. They are micro-lessons that teach your body how to defend you when the storm arrives. Because survival in the cold is not just about what you wear or where you sleep. It is also about the fire inside you and how well you keep it burning. Part 5. The myths that will kill you. In every winter disaster, there is a moment when fear turns into improvisation. The power is out, the temperature is falling, and people start searching for anything that promises heat. And this is when bad ideas become deadly ones. Because the internet is full of survival myths dressed up as life-saving hacks. And 2 of them appear every single winter storm. The first is the infamous terracotta pot heater. You've seen the videos. Someone flips a clay flower pot upside down, places a few tea light candles beneath it, and claims they've created a miniature radiant furnace that can heat an entire room. It looks clever, it feels clever, but it is a trap, one that ignores the most basic law in all of physics, the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. A tea light candle produces at most 30 to 40 watts of heat. That's it. Putting a clay pot over it does not create extra energy. It does not multiply the wattage. It simply concentrates the heat for a brief moment, like cupping your hands around a match. To meaningfully heat a standard room, you would need around 1500 watts, equivalent to 50 tea lights burning simultaneously. And even then, the moment you lift the pot, most of that warmth escapes instantly. But the real danger isn't disappointment. It's fire. When you trap heat under that pot, the temperature beneath it skyrockets. The paraffin wax of the candles can reach its flash point. And when that happens, the candles don't just burn, they erupt. You now have a grease fire on your living room table, and the pot itself may crack or explode from thermal shock. So please, skip the terracotta heaters. Use your candles for light, for morale, for comfort, but do not turn them into a bomb. The second myth is older, more romantic, and just as lethal. The belief that alcohol warms you up. We all know the image, an alpine rescue dog with a tiny barrel of brandy around its neck, ready to revive a frozen mountaineer. It is iconic, it is heartwarming, and it is completely wrong. Alcohol does not warm you, it tricks you. When you drink, your blood vessels dilate. Warm blood floods to the surface of your skin. For a brief moment, you feel a glowing, comforting heat. But that heat is being stolen from the organs that need it most: your heart, your lungs, your core. And once that warm blood reaches the surface of your body, it radiates away into the cold air far faster than usual. You are not warming yourself. You are venting your survival reserves. Alcohol accelerates hypothermia. It turns the cold from an opponent into a predator with a head start. What you need instead is hot cocoa, warm tea, or simply heated water. Anything that raises your core temperature rather than sabotaging it. Because in a winter blackout, survival is not just about what you do. It's also about avoiding the myths that feel comforting, but kill silently. And now that we've removed the dangers, it's time to face the most serious threat of all. The enemy you cannot see, smell, or touch, yet claims more lives in winter storms than the cold ever will. Part 6. Active heating and the invisible killer. By now you've trapped your body heat, insulated the floor beneath you, and fueled your internal furnace. Yet there are nights when the cold isn't merely uncomfortable, it is predatory. When the temperature plunges beyond what your body alone can manage, you need an external source of heat. And this is the moment where survival meets technology, and where caution becomes non-negotiable. Among the few reliable options that work indoors, catalytic propane heaters, such as the well-known Mr. Heater Buddy models, stand out. They're designed specifically for enclosed spaces. They contain oxygen depletion sensors. They shut themselves down when the air becomes too thin. And when used correctly, they can be the difference between shivering through a night and surviving it. But safe does not mean risk-free. Even these heaters demand respect. Crack a window, allow fresh air to enter. Maintain airflow. This small exchange of indoor and outdoor air is not wasted warmth, it is your lifeline. Because without it, you invite the most silent and efficient killer in all of winter survival: carbon monoxide. Every major freeze delivers the same headlines. From Texas to Maine, from mountain towns to city suburbs, families found still, quiet, unmoving. Not frozen, not starved, but poisoned. Carbon monoxide is the perfect predator. It has no color, no smell, no taste. It does not irritate your lungs or sting your eyes. It slips into your bloodstream unnoticed and binds to your red blood cells 200 times more tightly than oxygen. It replaces the oxygen your cells desperately need and suffocates you from the inside out. The symptoms are deceptively gentle. A headache, a wave of dizziness, a touch of nausea, symptoms you could easily blame on cold stress or exhaustion. And by the time you realize something is wrong, your judgment is compromised. Many victims lie down, thinking they simply need rest, and never wake up. This is why certain rules must never be broken. Never bring a charcoal grill indoors. Never run a gas generator in your garage, even with the door open. Never light a gas camping stove inside your tent or your improvised shelter. Any device that burns fuel also produces carbon monoxide, and without airflow, the gas accumulates in the same place you are trying to stay warm. If you choose to use propane, kerosene, or wood heat inside your home during a blackout, there is one tool more important than any heater, blanket, or tent: a battery-powered carbon monoxide detector. Not the one plugged into your wall, that one is dead along with the power grid. A standalone, battery-operated detector placed low to the ground or at sleeping height. It is small, it is inexpensive, and in the coldest storms of your life, it is the one device that will tell you the truth before your body can. Because surviving winter is not just about staying warm, it is about staying alive long enough for the warmth to matter. Part 7. Protecting the castle. While you and your family shelter inside your tent fortress, guarding every watt of heat, every breath of warm air, your home itself is quietly entering its own battle for survival. And if the house loses that battle, your shelter collapses with it. Behind your walls, hidden from sight, your water pipes are turning into ticking time bombs. Because water behaves strangely when it freezes, it expands. And that expansion carries enough force to split steel, rupture copper, and tear open PVC. The pipe doesn't burst where the ice forms. It bursts where pressure builds. And when the thaw comes, the destruction unleashes all at once, flooding the rooms you worked so hard to protect. That is why, during a winter blackout, you face a decision that is as practical as it is strategic. If your municipal water supply is still running and the indoor temperature hasn't fallen too far, the old and reliable trick still works. Keep the faucets dripping. Moving water resists freezing. It buys time. And by opening the cabinet doors beneath your sinks, you allow what little warmth exists in the room to reach the pipes instead of trapping the cold inside. But if your house has already begun to sink toward the freezing point, if the air inside is dropping toward 0 degrees Celsius, then dripping taps will not save you. At that threshold, the pipes no longer need hours to freeze, they need minutes. In those moments, the bravest choice is also the smartest. You drain the system. You shut off the main water valve entering the house. You go to the lowest faucet in your home, often outside or in the basement, and open it. Then you move to the highest faucet and open that one too. Gravity becomes your ally as it pulls the water down and out, emptying the veins of your house before the ice can claim them. You flush the toilets to clear the tanks. You pour RV antifreeze into the drains to protect the traps. It is tedious, it is inconvenient, but it is infinitely easier than repairing the aftermath of an indoor flood. Because a winter storm attacks two fronts at once, your body and your home. You've learned how to defend yourself, now you've learned how to protect the structure that shelters you. And once your castle is secure, there is one final lesson. A reminder that survival is not just about tools or tricks, but about the knowledge that turns cold fear into controlled action. Conclusion: the warmth of knowledge. In the end, survival has never belonged to the strongest or the wealthiest. It has always belonged to those who understood their environment, those who could read the forces around them and adapt before those forces closed in. Knowledge, not equipment, is the real insulation between you and the cold. When the grid collapses and the whisper of modern comfort fades, you are not stepping into chaos. You are stepping into history. You are confronting the same winter that tested medieval farmers, Arctic explorers, frontier families, and entire civilizations. But unlike them, you walk into that storm armed with an understanding they never had. The physics of heat, the science of your own body, and the truth behind the myths that mislead millions. You now know a blanket is not a heater. It is only a net that catches warmth you've already produced. You know the floor beneath you is not harmless. It is a thief waiting to drain you from the spine outward. You know your body is a furnace that must be fed with the right fuel at the right time. And perhaps most importantly, you know that comfort is not something given by the grid. It is something you can build with your own hands, your own planning, your own mindset. So when the next storm arrives, and it will, do not freeze in fear. Look around your home and see opportunity. Shrink your world. Build your microclimate. Raise your tent fortress. Lay down insulation. Fuel your internal fire. Protect your pipes. Vent your shelter. Stay alert to the unseen threats and stay grounded in the principles that keep humans alive in every age. Because the true hack was never just the tent or the layers or the peanut butter before bed. The real hack is awareness. It is the shift from panic to preparation, from helplessness to mastery. Stay warm, stay curious, and I will see you in the next chapter of history.